I am going to go ahead and be doing my slideshow on Dr. Jonathan Swift, and it was based on our reading that we had, A Modest Proposal. Dr. Jonathan Swift writes a proposal in 1729, and he explains how the Irish can help fix the economic crisis that its country was suffering at that time. So Ireland basically had a very bad economic crisis in 1729, and it was just really bad for the people regarding homelessness and unemployment rates. And he details in A Modern Proposal the society level of the poor of the Irish people living in Dublin, Ireland. He details a lot of other things, such as during this time, Ireland reached its time where men and women were so poor and that they suffered with the homelessness and unemployment and rising prices, that and also trade restrictions, that they would have to feed their families, and many of them had very large families. And in that being said, women, a lot of women became beggars just so they can provide income to support their families. They would find alternatives such as selling themselves for the Spaniards in order to gain income for their families and to provide for them. Dr. Swift also proposed a proposal that would be a solution. He states that the Irish feed their children, their babies, the babies that were just born, feed them as much as they can, fatten them up, and then sell their children to the wealthy for income. I know that sounds really dramatic, where then the wealthy would take them into the meat markets, and then income would be created. Dr. Swift provides data, and he provides the statistics on how this would help in the current economic solution that they faced during those times of unemployment, and it would help with unemployment, and it would help with overpopulation of the country. Meanwhile, in England, there was a shift in political parties as the Whigs came into power. Dr. Swift was part of the Whigs political party. British government overseed and they regulated the Irish laws, but Swift believed that the British government was just as corrupt as the landlords and merchants of Ireland. So let's talk about his personal life. Jonathan Swift was born in 1667. His father passed away 2 months after he was born. He was then diagnosed also with Meniere's disease, which, if you don't know what Meniere's disease is, it has something to do with hearing loss, and it has something to do with the inner ear tube. So he had suffered with that disease. And his mom, without an income, was not able to provide for him. So to make sure that he had the best upbringing that he could receive, she ended up later giving him up to his uncle, who took guardianship for him. Now, his uncle was actually his father's brother who took him on. But he did provide him with great education. He did send him to very elite schools. He did end up going to Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland. Despite his life outcomes during his early life, he went on and pursued his master's degree at Oxford University in 1692. So then along, in the future, he met a girl who was the age of 8 years old, and her name was Esther Johnson, which later on he nicknames Stella. And she was 15 years younger than him. So yeah, that's a little bit of a big age gap. And then he mentored and tutored her along the way, and it was rumored he went on to get married in 1776. So that's just the rumor that they were married, and must have been secretly done. And she had actually passed away before him, and he actually, Jonathan Swift, suffered a stroke in 1742. And it left him unable to speak while he was still suffering with the Meniere's disease. He died 3 years later after the stroke. And Swift is actually buried in St. Patrick Cathedral in Ireland. So what are the books that he wrote? Well, he wrote A Modest Proposal. And so he was known for the greatest satirist in the history of English literature. He wrote A Modest Proposal in 1729. Then he went on to write Gulliver's Travels in 1726. and A Tale of Tub in 1704. Now we say, what is that, or how does that correlate to exactly what modern day activists we have now? Well, Jonathan Swift influences on modern cultures, just like the enthusiasm he was enthusiastic about pursuing happiness and liberty for all, including Ireland and England and many other countries. But he is just like an activist, just like Martin Luther King Jr. with his most famous speech of Dream speech that he had. He brought into life the subject of social inequality many times during his writing. And he also is just like the activist Nelson Mandela, who fought for human rights, and like the late John Lewis, who fought for civil rights. Just like today, majority of Americans feel like wealth is built on that 1% of America. So meaning that only 1% of America feels like they're built on that wealth, and the 90% other feel otherwise. And then some of them till right now during these situations, just like the economic crisis in Ireland, feel like the cause of like the inflation, rising prices, gas prices, is a major factor in if you're wealthy or if you're poor. And I think there's no middle ground anymore. But with that being said, each discussion is always brought up with political debate, and political debate is always on the front lines of discussion and has a major impact on the laws of the United States. And it has been said that Swift paved the way for many future political writers. And I think John Lewis is actually really good, and he had wrote some good essays about social inequality, and also civil rights, because he was a big civil rights activist, just like John Swift, who fought for a solution for the Irish economic crisis at that time. So he has many quotations, but I took these two because I really, really enjoyed these two quotes. And in the words of Jonathan Swift, he says, "Laws are like cobwebs, which may catch small flies, but let wasps and hornets break through." And the second one was, "The poor nations are hungry and rich nations are proud, and pride and hunger will ever be at variance." And this is actually the end of my slideshow, but I just wanted to share that many of us read these articles or essays that have been provided by, to us during this course. And sometimes we think that, oh, this stuff is just so way 1780 and has nothing to do with the modern time. But actually, if you really, really analyze it, many of what had happened during those times, actually, we are going through, but in different ways. And that's just how I want to conclude my slideshow. Thank you for listening.